Yo, what is happening, guys? It is GM Cody, and welcome back to the channel. And another overview today, and we're going to be talking about role-playing games for once. I know I've been bullshitting about war games and miniatures and stuff for the past few weeks, but tonight we're actually going to talk about a role-playing game. But first off, and I guess you can probably peek over here and see what we're going to be talking about. But first off, I already made a video announcement. What's coming? I made a special announcement about the Fantasy Book Club, and we're going to be reading along with, we're going to be reading through The Lord of the Rings. Me, Andy, and Vince, and hopefully all of you guys, or whoever wants to join us. And you guys, we're going to do a live stream every week, and we're going to read 3 chapters, and we're going to start this on September 22nd. Start reading on September 22nd. Now we're going to go ahead and start reading the prologue. So if you guys want to join us, and go ahead and get your copy and read the prologue with us, and we're going to discuss that probably on the 22nd. Either way, we're going to start reading on the 22nd. So we're either going to do it the 22nd or 23rd. We're going to do a live stream together, and you guys are welcome to join us in the chat and live on video discussing Lord of the Rings every week. As we read through it, and as you read through it, hopefully. So that should be a lot of fun. Again, I already made an announcement about that. Another announcement, starting, which I haven't talked really anything about, but everybody else has been, the cat's kind of out of the bag at this point, is I'm going to be running a old school Essentials game. I think I briefly mentioned this. I'm going to be running an OSC game, and Session 0 will be starting this Sunday at 7 o'clock. Central Time. We have 5 players. 3, let's see. 2 of them, I guess. Maybe 3. And then, so we'll have Vince from the Prowlers and Paragons game. We will have Chase, who was from Grognar Grumbles. And we will have Todd, my brother, will also be joining us. And then we will have Chris, the G.I. Joe gamer, will also be joining us. And we will have another YouTuber, Elfbait, Eli, will be joining us as well. So we got 5 players, so that should be pretty awesome. We'll be playing in my homebrew setting, which I just kind of been working on. Not my old homebrew setting. I have a brand new setting that we're going to be that I've been working on. It's going to be a classic old school D&D game with little, some little bit of gonzo. Not too much, but a little bit. So it should be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys will join us for that. But tonight, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite fantasy role-playing games, and that is Talislanta. Yes, still no elves, baby. So Talislanta is an interesting game, one that I really, really love. Really love this game. For some reason, for a lot of reasons, it really fascinates me, and has for a long time. So my history, Talislanta, I first discovered this game around, I think, 2006 is when I had heard about Talislanta before that. I remember, like, in Dragon Magazine, reading the ads, still no elves, and I remember seeing it on the shelves, like, at the hobby store and the game store and stuff, but having no idea what the hell it was. And, not really particularly that interested in it until about 2006. I was looking for a alternative fantasy role-playing game to Dungeons & Dragons. So I was looking at all kinds of options. Now, I like weird and strange things, and I particularly like things like Wizard, the movie The Wizards, and, Heavy Metal Magazine, and, all that Philip Droulet art, and Mobius and stuff, and I like things like Legend and Gamma World and Thundar the Barbarian and Conan, so I like a lot of stuff that's not Lord of the Rings fantasy, even though I love typical medieval Lord of the Rings epic fantasy just as much as the next guy. I got a little burned out, and I think we all do, but I got a little burned out at that period of time. So I was looking for other games, not just game settings, but game systems too. And, somebody recommended to me to look into Talislanta. Now, thankfully, and it's still true today, the rules for Talislanta are free now. All the editions of Talislanta have been released free by the creator. I'll always forget his name. Is Michael Seshi, I guess is how you pronounce it. Really cool dude. He got the rights back to Talislanta, and he just released all of them, all the rules and all the source books and everything available free online with really nice scans. So I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can go look at the website, and you can download all this stuff for yourself. And also, I should say right off the bat, if after this overview you're interested in Talislanta and want a physical copy, there are a few versions that are available print on demand. This version specifically, the second edition, definitely is. You can get that off DriveThruRPG print on demand. And also, if you wanted the original, on the secondhand market, these are not very expensive. At least they weren't, a few years ago. So I still don't think they are. They're not like real high demand like old D&D stuff. So you can get secondhand Talislanta stuff fairly cheap. So Talislanta, what is it? If you're not familiar with it, it is a fantasy role-playing game. Came out in the 1980s, and there's been several different renditions of it. This is the second edition, which is my personal favorite. I also have the fourth edition. The first edition Talislanta was basically the exact book as the second edition, literally almost verbatim to this, except for the second edition just corrected some things and added some more things. But even down to the art and the typeset and everything in this second edition book is pretty much identical to first edition. So it's this is a proper second edition, just like Gamble World was a proper second edition, I suppose. And there was a third edition, which is I think the least liked version. Now, I don't really have a problem with it, but Wizards of the Coast acquired the license at some point in the early 90s and made their, republished Talislanta. And it's very similar rules-wise to the second edition and the first edition, but they changed the tone a little bit. I don't think it's a bad version at all, and it's nice and all. But what we're going to look at, to me, is the quintessential version, which is the second edition of Talislanta. And if you wanted to get started in Talislanta, because it has all these additions and stuff, the two I would recommend are these two versions, the second edition and the fourth edition. Now, the biggest differences between these two is the second edition has a lot of D&D-esque elements in it. It has levels and it has hit points. It doesn't, classes and stuff are a little odd in Talislanta, which we'll look at in a little bit. Talislanta is a skill-based system, so that's a little different than D&D, but, it has variable weapon damage and all that stuff. So, it has a lot of elements in it that would be very familiar to any D&D player. So if you still like a little bit of your D&D, this version might be the one you want to go for. Now, the fourth edition took out levels. It took out hit points are still in there. It still has the core rules are really still the same as the old second edition. But basically, there's no levels in here, and also this book is fully self-contained. So it's a really cool and thick tome. Now, this version secondhand is a little more expensive to find, but it's a really worthy addition to any role player's library. It's got everything in here. It's got a full setting. It's got the full rules. A full bestiary, magic, spells, and all the different character types. It's got everything you need for anywhere you want to play Talislanta in this one tome. So that's really great. So Talislanta second edition is the version we're going to be looking at. So the thing about Talislanta to discuss right off the get-go is the whole concept of Talislanta is that it's a fantasy setting that completely goes outside the norm of the normal fantasy setting. So in the old Dragon Ants, their motto was "Still no elves," and that is sort of true. there's no elves, there's no dwarves, there's no dragons per se. There's no gnomes, there's none of that. Okay, so this is a completely sort of original world, whole cloth. Much like Tikumel, Empire of the Petal Throne, or Sky Pirates of Jrune, or anything like that, where it's this is a world built from the ground up, a fantasy world built from the ground up. Now there's still magic and swords and sorcery, and all that good stuff. So it's still got all those elements, but it has its own flavor and setting attached to it, and it's fairly unique, I think, and it's very cool. And we're not going to go through the whole like setting and the lore and stuff. It is, the setting is not that dense. Actually, it's a lot of information packed into a small, contained very small, I think. So it's nice how Talislanta described its setting. It's much like how Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms did originally, where it just gave you little excerpts, little pictures or summaries into each little area and race and history, but it's really short and sweet. So you're not like looking through these huge tomes for all the information, and it leaves a lot up for the game master to create themselves. It gives you the basic framework, and you can go from there. And it gives you just enough information with something to work with, and you can build off that foundation. So the setting's not like super dense, right? But it is detailed, just not overly detailed, I guess is the right word. And it can be a weird and intimidating game for a lot of players, and it's hard to attract people to play Talislanta. And it's one of those games that I've always loved, or loved for a long time, and never played that much, to be honest with you. I've only played a handful of games of Talislanta. I've actually played it, but it's only been a handful of times when I can talk somebody into playing it. And it's just hard to attract people to it because it is so foreign and different. And things that are a little bit foreign and different can be hard for people to identify with. And it's also a little intimidating because there's just so many options and things that I think players and game masters get a little overwhelmed at the idea of running Talislanta. But hopefully, I'm going to do a whole like series of videos about Talislanta, and tonight we're just going to look at the second edition core rulebook, and we're not going to talk about extensively into lore and stuff. I might mention bits and pieces here. I'm going to do a whole video on the history of Talislanta, and maybe some videos on every like little location and stuff, and the different races and everything. But hopefully after watching this video and the other ones that I'll do, that you might develop an interest in Talislanta, and that's kind of the point of me talking about it. So, Talislanta, fantasy role-playing game, handbook and campaign guide, second edition. Now, this was self-published by Stefan Michael Seshi. He is still around and still working. He's still involved with Talislanta, and he self-published this under Bard Games. I don't remember the exact year the original first edition was published. I think this it's the second edition. It came out in 1989. So the first edition I think probably came out in 85 or 86. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure it wasn't too long before this version. But it's pretty cool that one dude basically created this whole world and setting and this really great cool game. So starting off here, we got the map of all the kingdoms of Talislanta. Now this book does not go into full detail into the setting of Talislanta at all. It doesn't really give you any information. There was a separate book for second edition called the Cyclopedia Talislanta, which went over a general worldview of all the, the locations and people and places and things. Now, the fourth edition, like I said, it's got all that information already in there. And also, with the second edition, they came out with the Cyclopedia Talislanta, which was a general overview, but they also came out with these cyclopedias, which were let me switch back here so you can kind of see these covers and stuff, which were, sorry, I'm a little tired and a little blanking out tonight. These cyclopedias, the detailed specific areas of the world. So, you know, the Seven Kingdoms and the Eastern lands and the Western lands and the Wilder lands of Zeron. And by the way, the art is awesome in this game. And most of the art was done by one person, and that is PD Breeding Black. I don't know if that's a male or female. I never looked them up, but whoever they are, really nice art in all these books and really cool covers. I really love them. I'm missing two of the cyclopedias. Like there's the desert lands and the first one, the Cyclopedia Talislanta, I'm missing as well. And you know, there's some other books to second edition. This is actually a first edition book, but it's completely compatible. And this is like the monster manual. It's called The Naturalist Guide, and this is a really cool book too. And you know, it details all the monsters and it has some really awesome art, which we'll look at this, you know, another time. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that there's lots of other books for Talislanta. And I also had the Sorcerer's Guide, which is not necessary at all if you had the second edition book. But it does have some cool stuff in there. So anyways, let's go back and keep looking through the book here. So Talislanta, for the time, Talislanta used a pretty innovative system, a little bit ahead of its time, actually, and probably, I no doubt, inspired some of the modern, you know, D20 mechanics. Now, this is a D20 based game, very strongly influenced by D&D, but it's got a lot of cool things that I think are actually better than D&D, to be honest with you. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but apparently this system has been adapted for other games and even adapted as like a generic universal system called the Omni system. I was not aware of that until recently, but it's a pretty cool system. You know, basically it's very simple. You know, you roll a D20, you add your modifiers from your attributes, you add any modifiers from you know, your skills and any penalties or bonuses depending on the situation, whether it's hard or whatever. And then you consult the chart. And you're trying to score an 11 or better. And 11 or better is you know, a base hit for combat. For magic, it's a success, and for a skill attribute, it's a success. Now, if you roll a 6 to 10, it's a half success. If you roll a 1 to 5, it's a miss. If you roll a 0, it's a mishap, a fumble. And if you roll a 20 plus, it's a critical or maximum effect. So this action table is really cool. I really dig it. And it's, you know, a little bit ahead of its time, I think, that it had this, you know, D20 kind of mechanic. And I really like the action table. And that's basically how everything works in the game, is off of this action table. You know, here's some notes and things. There are levels in this game. But I think levels work a little bit better than they do in D&D. So basically, you have skills and you have attributes. You don't have a number, like, you know, it's not like 3 to 18 and then a modifier. You just have a modifier for your attributes and your skills. And your skills go up by 1 rank every level, and that's a +1. And those, you know, those ratings are added to your attributes, and that determines your total, like, skill rating, right? And it's also determined on your archetype, which we'll look at later. So this tells you how to create a character. Attributes, you have intelligence, will, perception, charisma, strength, dexterity, constitution, and speed. Attribute ratings, 0, a +0, is considered average. A +1, anything +1 or better is considered good. Anything -1 or lower is considered bad. All right, and it can go up to, typically, I would say, like a +5 is like maximum human potential, but it can go higher depending on what kind of character you're playing. You do have languages, of course, and they're telling you about like all the basics. There is hit points in this game too. Now, one thing I like about the hit points is depending on what character archetype you're playing, you start off with a base number of hit points, and every level you gain 2 hit points, and that's it. So there's not a lot of hit point bloat in this game, and hit points make a lot more sense. So that's good. Skills, you get. I think it's worth just skipping ahead just for a moment. So really, when you're creating your character, the first thing you want to do is you want to pick your character type or archetype. This is something that's pretty divisive about Talislanta, and one of the things it turns off a lot of people. But once you understand it, I think it's really cool. So your race and your class are already determined for you, and you pick these archetypes. You don't pick your race and class and skills and stuff. They're already determined for you. Now you do get to make some choices when you pick your character type, but overall it's pretty much determined for you. Now I think this is a good thing for Talislanta, and the reason is because the character types really play into the tropes of what those all these different. There's so many different species and races and special professions and things in this game that it really plays up those tropes and really gets you into the world really easily. So I think it's a really good way. I think it's a perfect way for this, I think it was a perfect match for this system to have archetypes, and it works really well. And it makes getting, character creation really pretty fast. So what you do is, you pick one of these archetypes, and it'll tell you, like the Ammonian Archmage. It'll tell you like your physical characteristics, what your attributes are. So, the Ammonian Archmage here has an intelligence of +1 and a will of +4. They start with 12 hit points, no special abilities. And then right here is their skills that they start with. And then right here is what equipment they start with, how much gold they start with, and comments about the Ammonians. And it kind of gives you a little bit summary of what your character is like. Now, like I said, this book is not going to go into full detail about where these people come from and what they're all about. But the comments really give you a really quick and dirty summary of what your character, what your character's people and your profession is all about. So that's really the first. I wanted to skip ahead a little bit just to show you these. Just because this is kind of like the basic, building step number 1 at creating character is going to be selecting a character type. And I wanted to get that out of the way and establish what that's all about and what that entails before we continue on talking about combat or anything like that. And this piece of art here is awesome. That's probably my favorite piece of art in the book. And there is a ton of character types, so you're bound to find something that you can dig. And it does suggest at the end of the book that you and the GM can come up with your own archetypes if you so choose. Excuse me. So you can do that too. Now the other thing to note is the character archetypes are not balanced either. There are character archetypes in here that are stronger and just better than others. And that's, it states in this book that they're not balanced. It really plays up to what that character type would be, which I am perfectly fine with. I think it's great. And I think it encourages, proper role playing and whatnot. So, I have no problem with that. But it's something to note that there are character types in here that are just more powerful than others. So it has some pictures here of all the different character types, and this art's really cool too. And this just gives you an idea of the vast amount of different types of characters you can play. You can be the Griff, which have wings. you have the Cimmerillions, which I said they say there's no elves, but the Cimmerillions are this magical race that lives in a magical city and has airships and sky pilots and all that shit. And they're very similar to elves. The Bodor musicians, which they're a race that's all about, they're like traveling nomads that put on, shows and minstrels and whatnot, and they're really cool. The Almanians, they're this like super religious sect, like almost like Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor level of devotion, so and really the Almanians are really the only like cleric type in the game, which makes it really cool because they're like so devoted and so hardcore and they're whatever, but they can heal you and stuff. You have the Yazoo, they're like these four-armed nomadic warriors. The Ardu or whatever, these bird people are really cool. The Beastmen, there's just so many different character types. The Farons, which are these rat people. You've got the Griff, which I just think I already mentioned with the wings. The Gnomekin, which are literally like dwarves or gnomes, and they live underground. And they have like crystal magic and crystal weapons and stuff. You can play a freaking ice giant. The Mews, which are literally, fairies. Yeah, I mean, there's just, there's an incredible amount of different character types that you can play. The Thrall, which is the guy on the cover of the book, covered in tattoos, and they are magically created, basically genetically created super soldiers that gain their freedom, and now they live in the jungles of Taz, and they all cover their bodies in colorful tattoos to basically show that like their whole like lineage and history of their tribe and their victories and everything. So they're really cool. So the Thrall, are in here as a character. Anyways, there's just tons and tons of different characters, and there's even more in the other books. So, no shortage of character types you can play, and you would definitely, every player is going to find something they like. But I thought it was worth talking about that before we moved on any further into this. So the next thing we're going to look at is, how some of the mechanics and things work. Now, the thing about this game is there's not going to be much to talk about mechanics because they're really simple, and it's all based off that D20 mechanic with the action table. So it's really easy and fast to understand. So let's see. Let's talk about combat. Sorry, I had to pause the video for a minute. So combat is pretty simple. The way it works is you roll D20, you add your combat modifier, which is basically your combat skill, and it works just like any other skill. It has a skill rating, and and it's your skill rating plus your attribute modifier. And you subtract your opponent's combat rating. You find the difference between the two combat ratings, and that is either your bonus or your penalty to hit. Initiative is determined by speed rating, which is something I usually house rule and just, do a D20 roll plus your speed rating for initiative, which is easy enough. And you can have combat actions. So if you state beforehand, before you roll on the combat table, and you score a critical hit, you can get some special combat actions like an aim shot or subdue your opponent or disarm, capture, force back, etc., etc. Critical hits doubles normal damage and achieves your stated intent. So it's very it encourages, Talislanta encourages very narrative and role-playing heavy kind of things. So you can say, I'm going to, charge in and dive under my opponent's legs and, stab him in the back. Okay, well, you could do that, but you're going to have to get a critical hit. And to be successful at it, right? So it encourages a lot of those narrative kind of plays. Missile attacks happen much the same way. We were talking about weapon damage. It's variable, weapon damage, D4, D8, D6. And I should have stated right from the beginning, this uses typical D&D dice, the 7 dice we're used to. And so, yeah, that's it for combat. Now, your combat rating is dependent on what kind of character type you're playing, and you either have primary combat skill, secondary, or combat training. So warrior types will have primary combat skill, and they increase their combat skill by +1 every level. Thieves and rogues and, those kind of characters will probably have secondary combat skill. And so they increase every 2 levels by +1. And then combat trainings for like mages and scholars and completely non-combat characters. And they increase their combat skill by +1 every 4 levels. Okay, so that's how your combat skill works. Missile weapons work pretty much the same way, right? Armor is damage. It's damage reduction, right? So you can see here the different armor types. The strength rating you have to wear that armor. Now, you can wear that armor without that strength rating. You just get a penalty for each point of strength you don't have. Okay, so say you had a strength of +4 and you're wearing battle armor. Well, you would get a -1 to most of your rolls to wear that armor. But you can still wear it, right? Any class can wear any armor or whatever. And then your protection rating is how much damage it soaks, and it's a flat rating. And another cool thing about, Talislanta is you can have weapons and armor made out of different materials. And so you have black iron and red iron and blue iron. And for armor, it just decreases the weight of the armor. And for weapons, I forget what it does off the top of my head. I think it probably adds bonuses to hit and damage and such. I really can't remember, though. You don't quote me on that. You do have, enchanted weapons and armor, just like in D&D, of course. Ambush and surprise, you can basically do kind of like a sneak attack on your opponent if you have the stealth and ambush skills. Some rules for chase and escape, and some additional modifiers. Magic. So if you have magic, and you have to have if I think you so any character could potentially learn magic. I suppose for the most part, certain characters are forbidden just because of their character type. Like I believe the Thals don't use magic at all because that's the way they were bred, right? But so they just can't use magic. But most character types can learn magic, and some specialize in it, and some of them it's just a secondary thing. So magic works very, very much how combat works. You have primary magic skill, secondary magic skill, and magical training. And it works the same way as the combat skills, right? The magic system's very interesting. You can cast magic from memory, from a written work, or from a magic item. To cast magic, you roll a d20, add your magic rating, and see if you succeed. So all the magic users start with all the spells. And the thing about spells is, and we're going to skip ahead here, is there aren't that many spells, but it's better to not think of the spells in Talislanta as purely a spell. It's not like magic missile. They're more like magical schools, okay? Is really what each spell is. So you have cantrips, which are just, or I'm sorry, they call them charms, which are basically like cantrips in D&D, like 0 level spells, and they're just minor spells. And then you have basic spells, And the basic spells are very broad, like I was saying. They're more like magical schools. And so you can really use your imagination to do a lot with one spell. And it gives you a lot of options, too. So you have Conjuration, allows the caster to create a magical replica of any inanimate object or living organism. Divination, of course, divination allows the caster to receive knowledge of some past, future, or present event. Eldritch Power allows the caster to summon forth the magical energies of the outer dimensions, which may be utilized in one of two forms, Bolt or Shield. You have Elemental Power. A spell of elemental power allows the caster to summon forth the forces of nature, which may be made to make one of the following forms. So you can cast a bolt of any kind of like elemental force, earth, wind, ice, fire, lightning. A shield of elemental force. And yeah. Illusion, you can create illusions. Influence, you can influence people. You can command or charm them. Levitation, you can rise and fly in the air. Metamorphosis, you can magically transform into another creature or thing. Mystic Power allows the caster to summon forth the mystical powers of the mind. So it's mental magic. So you have a mystical bolt of psychic energy or a mystical shield. Radiance. A spell of Radiance allows the caster to create a sphere, beam, or burst of brilliant light. Revealment. A spell of Revealment allows the caster to detect one of the following: magical emanations and unseen presence. And summoning. You can summon things. And Symbol of Power. So you have sigils, seals, and wards. And that's all the spells in the base book. And there's also more powerful spells, which it says for the GM to make up, which are like ultra powerful spells. Now, the magic system as presented in 2nd edition is perfectly fine and serviceable, and it works. There is a better... personally, I think the 4th edition magic system is a lot better. And in 4th edition, it's what do you call it? It's spur of the moment magic, right? It's improvised magic, and the player characters are meant to make up their own spells on the fly. And I think that's a really great system. So, if I was to run a Talislanta game today, I would probably not use this system, even though I think it's great and works fine. I'd probably use the 4th edition magic system, and or there is a fan-made alternative magic system which you can find for Talislanta 2nd edition, which kind of incorporates some of the elements from 4th edition. And I made up my own version and kind of mixed and matched both magic systems together. So you have different schools, practices of magics like witches and warlocks and, card magic and all kinds of stuff. And they go into great detail on that in the 4th edition. So I would probably do more of an improvised magic system and kind of mix some rules from 4th edition. But that's just my opinion. So, because it's not a real robust magic system as presented in 2nd edition. So, skills, you got all the usual skills. You also have talents, which come with different character types. And these can be very, they're very specific to different character types. So, I'm trying to find them here. Let's see, where are they at? Special abilities is what they're called. So, you have the commune with nature and influence plants and telepath and shape change and spirit tracking and things like that. So you have very specific things that are, special abilities, and also, specific things to classes like the thralls or thals have their own combat style, for example. So those are in the skills as well. And we're not going to go over every single skill. There's a pretty decent, extensive list of skills. And I don't know if I mentioned it already, but, I was mentioning how you pick a character type and it determines your skills for you. Well, you also get to pick some extra skills to kind of customize your character a little bit. You do get a couple options to customize your character. You get to add and subtract a point, I think. and you also get to pick some extra skills. So if two people are playing the same character, they're not going to be exactly the same. So yeah, we talked about spells. Equipment, here's all the weapons, and like I was saying, weapons use variable weapon damage. And just like armor, they have a strength rating too, and you can use them, but you get a penalty if your strength doesn't meet the strength requirement. Shields, I don't really remember how shields work, to be honest with you. Let's check that out, because I really don't remember, actually. Shields. Let's see. Where are you? Shields. Probably here in armor. Yeah. Okay. So a shield increase the number of assailants which an individual can effectively defend against in a simultaneous combat is equal to the defender's combat rating divided by 2. A shield increases that total by +1 or by +2 if enchanted. Yeah, I think this is another rule I house ruled last time I played Talislanta, and just let a shield. I think I gave it like a parry, some kind of bonus to like your defensive combat rating. Not your actual combat rating, but your defensive combat rating is what I did last time I ran Talislanta. So, but that's the actual shield rule. And we were looking at equipment, and you got a pretty extensive list of weapons, and some very unique weapons, unique to the world of Talislanta. And like we were talking about, you can get weapons made out of different materials, which is really cool. And the rules are in here to do that. I also didn't mention in the magic section, it goes into great detail about making potions. It's got rules in here for making concoctions and potions and brews and stuff like that. So that's really cool that that's baked into the system. You've got a bunch of stuff in here that you see, like in D&D, weapons and armor, and tools and equipment, and a pretty good list of all that stuff. Different beasts, mounts, and you can buy slaves too if you wanted them. Probably not very PC for today's market, but hey, whatever. It was the 80s. Animal ingredients, to mix potions and stuff. Gemstones, which you'll sometimes need for different types of magic. All the different types of domesticated beasts that you can ride on. And of course, like I was saying, everything's unique in Talislanta, and the riding beasts are no different. But pretty cool nonetheless. And the Equus here is kind of like the typical, that creature right there is like the typical horse of this world. The mangonel lizard, this one right here. I think these are the guys that the Thals ride in Taz. So anyways, yeah, you get different types of beasts and stuff here. Pictures of all the different weapons, like any good 1980s role-playing game product would have. Different ships. There are airships. The Cimmerillions, the magical elf people have the wind ships, and they're not very common. They're very limited in the world, so it's not like you can. You could probably purchase one, maybe, but it would be extremely expensive. In fact, let's see what a wind ship costs. And it'd be hard to acquire, too, because it specifically mentions in the lore that there's not that many of them. Wind ship, yeah, it's 50,000 gold. The wind skiff is 15,000 gold. If you put that in perspective, like a sea galley is 20,000, so it's not too much. Pleasure barge is 200,000. Well, I think pleasure barge is what I would obtain for. Anyways, so you can get all kinds of cool, vessels and vehicles. Dune ships, which ride in the desert, and ride on, they look like a ship, but they are, have, skis on them so they can fly across the desert sand and whatnot. And then it kind of goes into, the terminology in the Talislantian world, and the different words and weapons and the special things, equipment and currencies and things mean in Talislanta, and gives a little bit of explanation about that. Gives an explanation about the Zodar deck, which is I forget what they're called, the Sarisia, I think. They're just literal gypsies. And they have, card magic, and they use basically like a Zodiac deck, Zodar deck, which is what it's called in this world. And it gives the rules for the Zodar deck here, and you just roll a d20 basically to see what card you draw. Chronology, tells you how the calendar works and notable dates in the world. All the different languages, currencies and pictures of them, different diseases and afflictions, cults, secret orders, and magical orders, which is very cool. Life expectancy of Talislantian races. And Game Master's Guide, kind of telling you, how you can come up with a character background, character types, personality traits for NPCs, additional rules for traveling, all the stuff, little things that a Game Master would need. Damage ratings for various, inanimate objects, basically. This tells you the little rules about creating your own character types and what, kind of what that entails. And it's very easy to come up with your own, like I said before. Hirelings and the rules for hirelings, like in D&D, sort of. Rules for climate and weather, and the different weather patterns in the world of Talislanta. So depending on where you are, you can determine what the weather is going to be, which is really cool, actually. And different weird and aberrant weather conditions like acid rain and black lightning. And, excuse me, my nose is itchy as always. The black wind and the witch wind and all that good stuff. And it gives an introductory adventure, which is pretty good, actually. I've ran some players through this one. It's fairly decent. I had to modify it a little bit to be interesting, but it's a really good adventure, and it's not a dungeon crawl, which is cool. And then it has a lot of possible adventure seeds, which are really good as well. I mean, there's probably there's 36 of them, and they're all pretty good. Talislantian encounters, here's all the monsters, and it gives all the stats you need for the monsters, so you don't even need the monster book to get started, which is cool. And a little excerpt about the city of Cimmeral, which is the capital of the Seven Kingdoms, which is pretty much like the core setting, the core, country, I guess, place in Talislanta the most quintessential place would be the Seven Kingdoms, and its capital city is Cimmeral, right? This would be kind of like the Waterdeep of Talislanta, I suppose. And it, kind of gives you an overview about the magical city of Cimmeral. Mass combat system, which is pretty good. Works pretty well. And, more rules for mass combat and all the different unit types and stuff. And an index. And that is pretty much Talislanta 2nd edition. Now, I didn't go into, obviously, this, I kind of glossed over some little rules and things here and there. But I think overall, hopefully I gave you the general impression of what Talislanta is all about. I think it's a really cool setting, a really fun game. The game system's really intuitive, nice and easy, and very logical and fun. It's great for any type of, flavor. The great thing about Talislanta is it can be adapted to any kind of flavor game you want. It can be a gritty game. It can be a classic sword and sorcery D&D type game. You can go delve in dungeons and stuff if you wanted to. It could be a travel, trek, epic quest type of game, big damn heroes kind of game. The world of Talislanta is so varied. You can place your adventures in all kinds of different environments and have a totally different type of campaign every time. So it really is a smorgasbord of play as you will. It presents a lot. Basically, the way to approach Talislanta is it presents a lot of really cool, interesting, and unique ideas, and you take those ideas and run with them. And the great thing about Talislanta, too, is, most players don't know anything about Talislanta. It's not like the Forgotten Realms where, there's a lot of, experts on the Forgotten Realms. There's very few experts on Talislanta. So when your player, I 99.9% guarantee if you're going to run a Talislanta game and your players sit down, they're not going to know a whole lot about the world, which is really great for you because you can just wing it. And you can take what you want. And the way I recommend running Talislanta is take what you want from the setting. I would play as the setting is presented, but take what you want from the setting and, change it and tweak it to be your own. And like I said before, there's a lot of room in the world of Talislanta to change things as your own. It does a really good job in that, I think. It's very unique and a little foreign and a little alien, but in a cool way, in a good way, in a comprehensible way. It's not so overly detailed and crazy that you're pouring through tomes of books trying to familiarize yourself with this foreign and alien world and concept. So I think it's a great game, great setting. Like I said, if you want to check it out, you can go to the Talislanta website and they have all the books there for free. Now, there is a new edition in the works, and it looks pretty damn cool. It's on Kickstarter right now, I believe. I think the Kickstarter is over and funded with. And it's going to have the old classic Talislanta rules in the book, as well as 5th edition D&D rules all in one book, which is really cool, in my opinion. So I don't know when that's coming out. I look forward to it. I definitely am going to buy it. The other thing, if you want to run a Talislanta game, the other thing I would recommend is pick one area of the world and stick with that for your first game. I wouldn't roam around the world. Pick one area of the world that looks interesting to you and, read up on that area, which is not going to take you very long because the entries for those areas are not huge and extensive, like I said. Get some ideas and make a campaign out of that. The other thing I would recommend that because there's so many different types of characters to play, once you pick your area, I would go ahead and make or either make characters for the players or just have a list of character types that they're allowed to play. Limit their character types for the first time around. And then once they get used to the setting, after a couple sessions, 1 or 2 sessions, you can be like, do you like that character? Would you like to look through the book? And you can make your own character. I found that's the best way to approach it, just because there's so many options that every time I've ran it, people are just overwhelmed if I just hand them the book. And I'm like, oh, look, you've got 50 different character types to pick from. Pick something. So those are my short and sweet recommendations. And that's my overview of Talislanta 2nd Edition. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm going to be doing more videos on Talislanta. Tonight was really just a general overview of Talislanta as a whole and kind of Talislanta 2nd Edition of what the rules are like, more than the lore and setting, even though I think you're starting to get a little bit of idea what that is. I'm going to do a video here in the coming weeks of just a brief history and more the lore. So if you guys want to see more about the lore of Talislanta, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. I hope you guys like this video. And hope you guys have a good night. Don't forget, again, the Old School Essentials game Session 0 will be starting this Sunday, 7 p.m. So make sure to come on by and check that out. Should be a lot of fun. We will be doing a session 0, which means everybody will be making characters and deciding what they're going to play live. And, OSC characters are pretty quick to make, so we might actually start playing. So I would call it a session 0.5 maybe. If everybody gets their characters made and we have like an extra hour to spend, I will start running the game. So we will see about that. Either way, it should be fun. Thanks again, guys, for watching. And thanks for watching all the videos and, leaving comments. I really love seeing all the comments and thumbs up and everything. And we'll see you guys next time. Y'all take care. Peace.